Hello, everybody. Welcome to Snyder's Inc. Again, I know it's past It's gonna be past midnight when we get this, which means we begin two reaction videos technically within the same day. I'm a busy man. I'm busy. All right, I just have stuff to do. Tomorrow's gonna be more busy, so I don't even know when I'm gonna do my second reaction, the second reaction of the day. Might get that in the morning. I got a lot of shit to do. We'll see. You might get it tomorrow, late night tomorrow, probably more likely. Yeah, we got Mr. Ballen one. This one has intrigued me to the point I couldn't wait any longer. I'm not at that video if I go in order, but I wanted to wait. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't wait any longer. This video is called "What is he hiding under there?" That's all the video is called, and I'm very curious. So everybody, I need you to hit the like button, hit subscribe button as we get into this video. Are you guys ready? Of course you're ready. Let's go.
This story has one of the most bizarre and tragic endings to any story I've ever told. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please replace the like button's mouthwash with glass cleaner. Also, please subscribe.
Also, everybody, I just want to add, if you have any suggestions for videos or channels you would like me to check out on here for reactions, let me know in the comments. I'm looking for some new stuff. Want your guys' suggestions. I want your guys' suggestions for it. Let me know in the comments.
To our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. In 2017, Daniel Beckwith was a 27-year-old genius hacker and prolific Bitcoin day trader. He was living in his modest childhood home in Bethesda, Maryland, with a multi-million-dollar fortune to his name. And he was hiding something major in his basement that, when it was discovered by authorities, he would be convicted of one of the rarest criminal charges in the American legal justice system. But to understand this story, we have to go back to the beginning. Daniel was born in 1991 to his eccentric and brilliant parents, Linda and David. He would be their only child. David was a PhD and an accomplished opera singer that had trained under a famous French composer, and he had also performed at the White House. Linda was a Columbia Law School trained lawyer who at one time had been a government attorney, but she gave it up because she described it as a scummy profession, and she became a vocalist like her husband. When Daniel was just a toddler, he learned how to read, so it was clear he had unusually high intellect, which Linda guarded fiercely. She decided that public schools were not capable of teaching her son, and so she decided she would homeschool him. By the time Daniel was just 5 years old, he was consuming entire novels, and shortly after that, he was able to break down and reprogram his PlayStation. But despite his...
That is an intelligence that is rare and special. That's an intelligence that, with the right people mentoring him and pushed in the right direction, can become crucial to people. It can be used in the right way. If pushed the wrong way, with the wrong people around him, it can go to a dark place. Let's see which way he goes.
His incredible intelligence, Daniel had a really lonely childhood. He was rarely allowed to go outside and play with other kids, and on the rare chance that he was, his parents always hovered around him the entire time. And few playmates or adults...
That's not good. See, this is where it's bad, because the parents are protecting him. They're trying to protect his intelligence and that, because they see a bright future. But when you do it, you can't. If you do it too much, which is what they're doing, if you do too much, it loses that factor. It loses that effect. You aren't able to do it. So completely get why this probably had an effect on him, because their way of protecting him will actually hurt him in the end.
for that matter, ever came inside of Daniel's house because Daniel's parents were big-time hoarders. You couldn't take 2 steps into that house before knocking into a big stack of papers or books or old food containers. In 2000, when Daniel was 9 years old, his father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which left Linda, his mother, to take care of both of them. And in that time, Linda became obsessed with protecting their property. And so anytime anyone walked in front of their house, just near their property, she would run outside and yell at them until they ran away. But despite their eccentricities, it was clear to anybody that knew the Beckwith family that Linda and David just adored Daniel. They just could not give him any space. One neighbor recalled seeing the 3 Beckwiths out trick-or-treating one year, all wearing these same matching hamster outfits. And this was well into Daniel's teenage years. Daniel loved his parents, but it was in those later teenage years that he started to realize just how smothering they really were.
Yeah, he's gonna start rebelling. He's gonna rebel. I'm telling you, he's gonna start rebelling. It's gonna cause problems. But he has to. In his mind, he has to start rebelling because it's so smothering, these people, that he slowly now will become angry and bitter towards them.
And so he began looking for other places to connect with new people. And he found a new community on an online forum called 4chan. There, Daniel got to reinvent himself. He adopted this kind of tough guy, genius persona where he bragged about finishing most of high school by the time he was 15, and that nowadays he just blows stuff up in his backyard to test his chemistry know-how. But over the years of posting on this channel, Daniel would occasionally let his guard down, and he would talk about something that was really close to him, that pervaded his thoughts at all times, and would ultimately be his downfall, and that was his extreme fear of death. Daniel's isolation looked like it might come to an end in 2010 when he enrolled at the University of Illinois to study computer science and electrical engineering. His parents dropped him off at the Amtrak train station with all of his stuff for college. They said their goodbyes. Daniel hopped on the train, and he waved to them as they disappeared, and he likened that experience to being set free. It was the first time he was going to be without his parents for any amount of time. But unfortunately, after only being at school for a couple of months, he had to go right back home again because his mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she had hid it from Daniel. In fact, she had hid it from everyone and not even seen a doctor. And so when Daniel got home, she was in really bad shape, and she passed away 2 weeks later. Including Daniel, only 3 people showed up for her funeral. And so Daniel, with his mismatched clothes and his pants that were too short, he gave his mother's eulogy, and in it, he just looked dazed, and he actually said, "I feel lost." And then shortly after Daniel went back to school, his father began declining rapidly from Parkinson's disease, and so Daniel had to put him into assisted living. And so living by himself at his apartment in college, Daniel was overcome with grief, and now more than ever, he was just terrified of death because now he had seen it up close with his mother, and he was watching his father wither away. And so he went back on 4chan, and he began talking about taking a more defensive position against his own death. What that translated to is Daniel began researching what the most common killers were for people his age, and he discovered that car accidents were a big killer. And so he reinforced all the doors of his car with Kevlar plates, and anytime he drove it, he wore a Kevlar vest, which he believed protected him from blunt force trauma in the event of a crash.
This is a fear being taken to a humongous new level. This man's has a fear of death with all of us do. I feel like no one with a normal brain loves the idea of death. At least the idea of dying. But the thought in my head of someone wearing plates and trying to protect their car and everything from a car accident, it's just so weird. Like, that's a little extreme, I think.
Knowing that cancer was a big killer, he went out and removed every mole on his body as a preventative measure. But what Daniel viewed as the biggest threat to his life was not something that statisticians would tell you it's something people his age or people in his country should be worried about, and that was a nuclear attack on the United States. Daniel believed it was imminent. Daniel believed the only way he could protect himself was to build a proper fallout shelter, and because his mother had left him a multi-million-dollar trust fund, he had the means to construct one. And so he left college and went back to his home. He went down into the basement and he picked a spot right in the middle of the ground and he began digging. Over the next 2 years, Daniel spent part of his time living at college, being a really good student, and the other half of his time was spent living at his family home, hiring different contractors to come in and dig out this massive labyrinth of tunnels underneath his property. But in 2012, his schoolwork and his tunnel work had to come to a complete stop because he got in trouble with the law. Professors at Daniel's school began reporting that somebody was sneaking into their office, hacking into their computer, and then sending these really inappropriate and embarrassing emails to everybody in their contact list, which was primarily former and current students and faculty. And then whoever it was that was hacking their computer was then supergluing their door shut. After several months of investigating, the police finally got a suspect when students on campus said, yeah, Daniel Beckwith is actually a prolific hacker, and he just spoke at a hacker conference, so he seems like someone who would be capable of doing this. And so a detective went to Daniel's apartment to pay.
This is just weird. Why are you hacking the school emails and sending inappropriate stuff and then super gluing your door shut? Why are you being so weird, Dad? Like, that's just immature stupidness.
Him a casual visit, but Daniel wasn't there or didn't come to the door, and the detective looked down and saw a package that was sitting there that was addressed to S. Loomis Detweiler. The detective believed this could be an alias for Daniel Beckwith, and so he went back and they ran that name, and sure enough, it was connected to an online persona that had recently been bragging about breaking into their professors' offices and hacking into their emails. So the police used this information to attain a search warrant. They went back to Daniel's apartment. He wasn't there. They used the key they had been given for the unit. They went inside and they're hit with just this ridiculous mess of an apartment. It looked exactly like Daniel's home growing up, with stacks of papers and books and wires and computer equipment and trash and old food containers. And there was just this dirty mattress sitting right in the middle of the apartment with no sheets on it. And in the back, on top of a mini fridge, was Daniel's laptop. It was open and it was unsecured, so they logged into it, cloned his hard drive, and left. And using the information that was contained on this hard drive, detectives were able to, without a doubt, connect Daniel to the vandalism and hacking that had been taking place at his college. Daniel was arrested and charged with a number of serious felonies, but shortly before his trial, Daniel struck a plea deal and then immediately took to Reddit to tell the world that he fully expected the state governor to pardon him because he had made a number of significant contributions to his campaign. But that pardon never came. However, Daniel's sentence was remarkably light. He was ordered to pay $23,000 in restitution to the college and then was given 2 years of probation.
$23,000 is probably, I was going to say, probably tough for him, but then again, he got a multi-million-dollar trust fund from his mother, so that's actually probably nothing to him. Should have gone a tougher sentence, not gonna lie. Should have gone a tougher one, just because guy's too cocky and arrogant, clearly. So, teach him a lesson.
Daniel was expelled from his school, and so he moved back into his childhood home where he lived alone full-time. Once home, Daniel focused his efforts on this bunker he was building in his basement, which by now was a fairly large series of tunnels that zigged and zagged in different directions well beyond his property lines. Once Daniel hired a couple good contractors to continue to expand this bunker, he turned his attention to a new activity, Bitcoin trading. And in relative short order, Daniel became extremely good at this and made millions of dollars. By 2015, Daniel was off probation. His bunker was almost completely built out, although he did have plans at some point to hire more people and continue to expand it. And in terms of Bitcoin day trading, he wasn't doing it as much because he had made so much money. Now he just spent his time sitting inside of his bunker, live streaming on this new website called Blab about his investment prowess. And every time Daniel live streamed, he was cautious to never reveal his identity. And so he used the username 3-Alarm Lamp Scooter, and he wore a large fire protection hood over his face, and he used a voice changer. Within his small but avid following on Blab, there was one 19-year-old named Askia Kafra who completely idolized Daniel, even though he only knew him as 3-Alarm. Askia was from a middle-class home, and he was the son of immigrants from Trinidad. He also lived only 15 minutes away from Daniel, but he didn't know that because Daniel never gave up where he lived because he was so obsessed with protecting himself against a potential nuclear attack. He just told people he lived in some underground bunker in the middle of Virginia somewhere. Askia longed to be successful and rich, which is part of the reason he idolized Daniel so much. When he was 18 years old, he received a $100,000 settlement for a lead poisoning case, and he for a second got got to live the life of someone rich and famous, and he blew it immediately on expensive dinners and rented Mercedes and BMW cars. And once the money was all gone, he was certain he could get it all back. And his big plan...
All I can say is boy, do people wish they could have big amounts of money. Even I wish I could have big amount of money. I will never have big amounts of money on my hand. No. It's too hard to do. Obviously people say, oh, you could if you become successful in here. I'm lucky enough to have what I got so far when it comes to subscribers. I'm lucky enough to have all you guys who subscribe to this channel now. So, like people say, when I've heard people subscribe to, they say, I can't wait to see you when you some point hit 1 million. I'll be lucky if I hit 1,000. When I get 1,000, if I ever in my life hit 1,000 subscribers, I will be in disbelief. So right now, my focus is just keep doing videos to entertain you guys.
Is he was going to build an app called Equity Shark, which is basically crowdfunding that allowed people to invest small amounts of money into new promising startups. And he believed this app was going to be the way he made not millions, but billions of dollars. But he didn't have any real money to fund this app. And so he and his business partner applied for a $100,000 grant for young entrepreneurs that have dropped out of college, something Askia had just done. And they were certain they were going to get this grant. But despite Askia's confidence, he was far from a sure bet for this money, because Askia still had many of the blind spots of someone still learning how to become an adult. And one of his biggest blind spots was how quick he was to trust people. And so it was shortly after Askia and his business partner had applied for this $100,000 grant that Askia came across Daniel on Blab, and he was so taken with him, and he's got all this money, and he's so successful. And that's when Daniel told his followers that he was open to new investments. And so Askia, who wanted to get closer to Daniel and figured he could use some additional money, because even when they got this $100,000 grant, they would need more money to build the business. He decided he would ask Daniel if he and his business partner could pitch him on Equity Shark, and Daniel agreed. And so in June of 2016, Askia and his business partner went to this hookah bar that was about 20 minutes away from Askia's home, and there they sat, waiting for a 3-alarm lamp scooter to walk through the door. And they didn't know what he was going to look like, because whenever they saw him on his live streams, he had that big fire protection hood on, but as soon as Daniel walked through the door, they immediately knew it was him, because he had this comically bulky shirt on where it was obvious he had a bulletproof vest on. And so this guy with the bulletproof vest walks over, introduces himself as 3-Alarm, aka Daniel. And so by now, Askia and his business partner are very accustomed to 3-Alarm's eccentricities like his bulletproof vest. They just kind of overlook it and begin pitching him on Equity Shark. And they tell him that the success of the company, they believe, is hinged on this $100,000 grant that they explained they are certain to get. They meet all the parameters. They are exactly what they're looking for. And at the end of the conversation, Daniel was convinced that not only were they going to get this $100,000.
Considering the fact Daniel gets arrested by the end of this, I'm concerned for the safety of these two businessmen. For the fact that they trust this man so much. Either that or this man is going to scam these two in such a humongous way he gets arrested. But I'm not sure which one. But there's something about Daniel at this moment that makes me not trust him.
Grant, but that Equity Shark seemed like a great investment. And so after a number of follow-on meetings, Daniel ultimately committed $5,000 to Equity Shark, and he told Askia that they would have to pay him back with the funds from the $100,000 grant, or if for some reason that didn't come through, Askia and his business partner would have to find another way to pay back Daniel. Askia and his business partner were totally thrilled. They felt like that $100,000.
So in them I feel I just found the trigger of what causes these two businessmen's downfall. Askia's and them. It's gonna be the fact they can't pay him back.
grant is a done deal, so there's no risk to this investment by Daniel. And shortly after they secured the $5,000, the manager of the $100,000 grant program called Askia and said, hey, you guys have made it to the second round of applicants. We need you to fly out to San Francisco and pitch your company to us. And so they're totally excited. They tell Daniel that everything's progressing exactly as they planned, and they fly out to the West Coast. But they book their flight to LAX, not to the airport in San Francisco. So they land 400 miles south of where they needed to be. And so they're cussing themselves for being so stupid about this. And they realize they can't even rent a car. They're not old enough to rent a car. But they were old enough to rent a U-Haul. So they rent this huge U-Haul, and they start bombing up the coast towards San Francisco to...
These fucking men are brilliant. I love these men. They're brilliant. They're like, listen, we can't rent a car. We can rent a U-Haul. So why don't we rent a U-Haul and drive 400 miles? These men are brilliant. I love that. This is the greatest strategy. The hard work and determination of these businessmen, I love.
To make this meeting in time, but they plugged the wrong address into their GPS and did not go to the right building. They went in the opposite direction. And so by the time they finally got all the way back to the meeting place in San Francisco, it was too late, and the manager that was waiting for them was clearly upset about it and said, just go home, we'll be in touch by phone. Back home, Askia was totally embarrassed when he told Daniel about their botched trip, and he was convinced that they were not going to get the grant now because of how badly they had screwed up the meeting. And so Askia began asking Daniel if he would give them more money, because maybe if they use that additional money to bolster the app and make it more appealing, they will have a better chance at getting that $100,000 grant. Daniel eventually said he would commit more money, but Askia picked up that he was really hesitant and just seemed not to be very interested in Equity Shark anymore. And so Askia, hoping to stay in Daniel's good graces and wanting to make sure he was confident in this investment, he said, hey, let me do something for you. I heard on one of the channels online that you're looking to expand some of the tunnels inside of your bunker. Let me do that for you. Daniel, who was looking to expand his...
There's something about this that's just wrong. If you don't pay him, I feel like I would not want to go down into an underground tunnel with the guy you need to pay back. I'm sorry, that just sounds way too risky. I wouldn't trust it.
Bunker was eager to hire Askia, but he told him that if you're going to work for me, there's going to be heavy restrictions on how this goes, because it's a very secret location. I don't want this to leak out, where my bunker is, because as you know, there's going to be a nuclear attack on the United States any day, and my bunker is one of the only places that's going to be safe. Askia said that was totally fine. He would do whatever Daniel needed. So on January 28th, 2017, just after 2 a.m., Askia sat outside his house waiting for some car to come pick him up. And at some point, Daniel showed up in a minivan, and he walked up to Askia, he led him into the van, and then he put goggles that were blacked out on his head. And then Daniel drove around in loops up on the highway and background neighborhoods, giving the impression to Askia that they were actually going somewhere far outside of Maryland, but really they were only going 15 minutes away to Daniel's actual house. And when they got to Daniel's house, Daniel made Askia keep the goggles on. Daniel got out and he led Askia by a string into the house, and once they got inside, Daniel had to carefully walk him around all the junk that was piled up all over the house. They made their...
This is stupid. This is stupid under many circumstances. Daniel's being ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous and stupid.
Way all the way to the back.
Also, what does a quotation, this quotations nuclear attack have to do with Askia? He's not the one that's gonna nuke the US. What the hell is wrong with you there? Daniel's stupid.
Went down the stairs into the basement where Daniel had intentionally created this unbelievable maze all over the basement floor with chicken wire and stacks of bikes and books and more junk. It was designed so anybody who was working inside of the tunnels, that even once they came out of the exit, wouldn't even know how to get out of the basement. And finally, after bringing Askia all the way through this maze, he stopped him right in front of this hole in the ground that was the entrance into the underground tunnels. And at that point, he told Askia to remove his goggles. Daniel told him to hop down and take a look. So Askia hopped down, and he's looking around, and he's seeing these massive tunnel systems pushing out in all directions, and all of it is extremely well lit. and he couldn't believe what he was looking at. He's looking at Daniel like, how far does this go? And Daniel said, it's huge. It was at this point that Daniel handed down to Askia a pickaxe, a shovel, and a hard hat, and he explained to him that anytime you're in the tunnels, I'm going to have to cover over this hole because I can't even have you in the basement. It's too much of a security threat for me. And in fact, I'd prefer it if you worked multiple days in a row because anytime you leave, we're going to have to do the whole blindfold thing. And so you should anticipate living in the tunnels for days at a stretch. But don't worry, there's a mattress down there, there's Wi-Fi.
This is so fun. No, I don't like this guy. I don't like it. I feel like this guy, Daniel, has now become fucked. Daniel went from a guy I just thought was weird to a guy that's now just stupidly fucked. This man has so much issues with him. This man is... How many people does he have down here? I hope he has more than just one.
Everything's well lit up, and there's a 5-gallon bucket if you need to go to the bathroom. And so Askia, who trusted Daniel, didn't love this setup, but in a weird way, he was just kind of excited to be a part of this guy's life, this guy who he believed was just this really amazing person. And so over the following winter and spring, Askia would make the blindfold commute all the way to Daniel's house 15 minutes away, and then he would spend multiple days down in the tunnel chiseling away into these different tunnels that Daniel wanted expanded. But as well as it was going working for Daniel, Askia was dealt some bad news at the end of the spring when it turned out Equity Shark was turned down for that $100,000 grant. Askia was surprised, he was crushed, and he now knew he would have to pay back that $5,000 that Daniel had invested in Equity Shark because he wasn't getting it from the $100,000 anymore. And so he asked Daniel if he could increase his hours in the tunnel to try to pay back that debt. Daniel agreed, and so on September 10th, Askia was back at Daniel's house, and he was down inside the tunnels in one of the lowest sections that required squeezing through a very narrow section that Askia had actually texted his friends about and said that section made him really claustrophobic, but he had to do it. He needed to pay back the debt. And so later that day at 4 p.m., when Askia was down in that lower section, the power in the tunnel suddenly went completely out. So it's pitch black. And so Daniel, who was upstairs, recognized it happened. And so he navigated through all the junk upstairs, came downstairs, navigated the maze all the way to the circuit breaker in the basement, and he flipped the switch. And the power went on, but Daniel heard a loud buzzing sound coming from upstairs in the kitchen. And so worried that could be an electrical fire, he turned back off the circuit breaker, putting Askia back in total darkness down deep inside of this tunnel. And Daniel went back through this really epic maze in the basement, went up the stairs into the kitchen to investigate the buzzing sound, and as soon as he left the basement, he could smell smoke. And he turned around and looked down into the basement, and he could clearly see smoke was filling the basement. And so Daniel ran downstairs and he yelled out for Askia, and somewhere way down in the tunnels, he heard Askia yell out, "Hey dude, what's going on?" And Daniel's like, "Come on, you gotta get out of there." But he was totally overcome with smoke, and Daniel had to run back upstairs, ran outside, he caught his breath, and then he charged back into the house, down into the basement. But as soon as he got to the bottom of the stairs, he didn't see Askia, but he saw flames leaping out of the entrance into the tunnels. And he knew Askia was down there, and he's screaming for Askia to get out, but he didn't hear from him. And at some point, Daniel just had to turn around and leave because he was totally overcome with the heat and the smoke. A neighbor...
There's something about him that just seems too weird. Until this is revealed, I think there's something fishy about this. There's something too fucked, and I don't like it.
Saw Daniel come running out. They saw the smoke coming out of his house, and so they called 911. And so while Daniel paced outside screaming for Askia, Askia is down in total darkness. There's smoke filling up the tunnels, and he began making his way across that very tight section. But once he got out of there, he had no idea where to go because this tunnel system was huge and all the power was out, so it's pitch black, and there's smoke inside of the tunnel. And so he desperately starts crawling all over the tunnel. He's hitting dead ends, and finally, miraculously, he makes it to the exit of the tunnels. Everything around him is on fire. He leaps out, but now he's in a basement that's covered in smoke, and every time he had been led to that point in the basement, he had been blindfolded. He didn't know how to navigate the maze, and so he's looking out, and it's all smoky, and all he can see is there's one window on the far side that he might be able to get to, and so he starts leaping over the chicken wire and the bikes, and he sneaks past a furnace, and it's just flames and smoke all around him, and he gets to this little shimmer of light, which is the window, window, except he realizes there have been metal bars placed in front of it. There's no way to get through it. But in his desperation, he grabbed a rolly chair and he put it in front. He climbed on top and he managed to break the glass, but he couldn't get through the bars. And eventually, after a number of agonizing minutes, he fell backwards and was consumed by the flames. After the fire...
Why do I feel like this was set as a trap? I'm sorry, I feel like it was set as a trap. There's something about Daniel that's too suspicious to me. I want to know, I need to finish this to reveal what happened, but I feel that's the case.
Was finally put out and Askia's body was finally found inside of the basement underneath that window. Investigators didn't understand how Askia couldn't have gotten out of the basement, and Daniel tried to lie about it and say, oh, well, he might have been asleep, that's his bachelor pad down there. But eventually, as investigators were looking for the cause of the fire, they uncovered the entrance to this massive tunnel system, and that's when they realized Daniel had put Askia effectively into a death trap. When the fire started, Askia was at the bottom of this tunnel system, and so he had to navigate all the way back up to the top, killing all this precious time as the fire grows, and then he finally got into the basement, and there's flames everywhere, but he has no idea how to navigate the maze Daniel had made down there. And so he managed to get to the window because it was the only thing he could see, but of course Daniel had put bars in front of it, and so Askia had nowhere else to go, and he just died. The investigators would point out that where he died, he was only 2 steps away from almost certain safety. He just didn't know it. After an 8-month investigation, prosecutors charged Daniel with involuntary manslaughter as well as one of the rarest charges in the American justice system. It's called second-degree depraved heart murder, where Daniel's disregard for human life was so extreme it amounted to willful killing. And so he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. So that's going to do it, guys.
Interesting. So because he has such a non-care for human life and he didn't care about it at all. That was equivalent. That was equal to, like actual murder. So they arrested him, and it's not the same sentence. So 9 years in prison. That's a twist. I guess I thought it was a setup from him all along, but no, it just happened to be that this dude's stupid, idiotic thought process and stupid willingness to guard everything like his life was apparently on the line caused death to him. Death to the other guy, not Daniel, the other guy. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you all enjoyed this reaction video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment what you think down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all for the next one.